I'm Michael Anderson. I never imagined that a simple day in New Orleans could completely transform my existence. Today, with my feet firmly on earth and my heart full of memories and revelations, I decide to share a story that I never expected to experience. This is not a story of lectures or books. It is simply the testimony of an ordinary man who, in an instant of near death, encountered the divine, confronted his fears, and returned to fulfill a greater mission, even if silent and reserved. I remember that day vividly, as if every detail was burned into my mind and pulsed with the intensity of lightning. It was a typical New Orleans afternoon, where the summer heat mixed with the pre-carnival fervor, transforming the streets into a vibrant stage of colors, sounds, and emotions. I, Michael Anderson, was riding my motorcycle along a busy avenue, feeling the freedom of each pedal stroke and the wind caressing my face when the peaceful routine of the day was abruptly interrupted. Everything happened in an instant that seemed eternal. I was crossing a street while listening to the distant murmurs of the city, and suddenly a car appeared out of nowhere. The vehicle, in total disregard of traffic rules, ran the red light at a terrifying speed. I heard the deafening sound of skidding, and in a second, the world around me transformed into a chaotic whirlwind of colors and lights. "No! Dodge!" I shouted to myself, a command that was lost in the crash of impact. The shock was brutal. I felt my body being thrown violently against the asphalt, while the energy from the accident shook me in all directions. The pain that spread through my body was intense, as if every cell was screaming in agony. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow down. Every sound, every movement was suspended in a vortex of disorder. I saw fragments of my life flashing before my eyes, in disjointed flashes that left me stunned. As I rolled down the sidewalk and felt the impact of every object I encountered along the way, my thoughts were lost. The world was spinning, and reality was falling apart into 1,000 pieces. It was in this whirlwind of pain and confusion that consciousness began to slowly leave me. I tried in vain to scream for help, but the sound I made seemed distant, as if it came from a place where I no longer belonged. Amidst the approaching darkness, a feeling of unusual warmth began to infiltrate my being. At first, I mistook this sensation for the passing reflection of a feeling of resignation, but as the pain intensified, I realized that something extraordinary was about to happen. That was when my eyes caught sight of an intense, pulsating blue light, which timidly appeared on the horizon of my field of vision. The light seemed to have a life of its own, a presence that defied natural laws, radiating a comforting and inexplicable energy. "Michael, don't fight anymore," whispered a voice that seemed to come from everywhere, but at the same time was incredibly intimate. That sound, so soft and at the same time loaded with authority, reached me deeply, as if it spoke directly to my soul. For a brief moment, the pain was replaced by a sense of peace, a calm that contradicted the violence of the moment. As I struggled to maintain a shred of consciousness, I realized that my body was becoming detached from physical reality. The sensation of floating took over me, and I could see, as if I were a spectator of myself, the chaotic scene unfolding on the asphalt. The colors mixed and the sounds turned into distant echoes, giving way to an almost sacred silence. In that instant, the perception of time faded, and I knew I was about to cross a threshold between life and something beyond. Fear mixed with hope, and every second seemed to carry the weight of an eternity. I felt that something bigger was waiting for me, something that promised not just the end, but a profound transformation. In the instant following the overwhelming pain, something began to change. I was on the edge of an abyss where consciousness dissolved, and in the midst of that darkness, a blue light, pulsating and comforting, became increasingly present. As my vision blurred, the feeling of warmth replaced the agony, and I realized that I was no longer fighting the inevitable, but being gently guided into a new reality. "Michael, rest. You don't have to suffer anymore," whispered the voice that invaded the silence, a voice that seemed to be both the sound of the wind and an intimate whisper, directly in the depths of my soul. Even though I was stunned, I felt that message was more than just comfort. It was guidance to abandon resistance to the transition. Each word, despite being soft, carried the firmness of someone who knows the path to peace. As thoughts faded and the feeling of gravity lost its power over me, everything around me began to transform. The view of the asphalt faded away, and I saw myself floating, as if my physical body were just a cocoon about to open up to a new universe. With every second, the blue light intensified its presence, embracing me with an energy that made me forget about the pain. There was no longer the jarring sound of the impacts or the fragmented vision of the accident, just a deep, comforting calm. I could feel time expanding, making every split second a silent eternity. In this almost trance-like state, the perception of my senses sharpened. I heard the whisper of the breeze. I saw nuances of colors that were previously imperceptible, and in a way, I understood that space and time were dissolving into something much larger. "Don't resist, Michael. Your body is too injured to fight fate," repeated the voice, which now seemed to echo from every corner of the space. As I surrendered to this new state, I began to notice small details around me. There was a feeling of upliftment, as if every cell of my being was being reordered. In the midst of this transformation, the sensation of floating intensified, and suddenly, I could see my own silhouette, as if I were being observed from the outside. It was at that moment that I understood that I was transitioning from a physical plane to a more subtle and expansive state of existence. "I never thought it would be so serene," I murmured, my voice still cracking, to the invisible entity guiding me. The answer was a soft nod, a kind of light pulsing in response, as if to say that everything was fine and that I was on the right path. The feeling of being transported to a universe where pain no longer had a place was indescribable, and every moment, the memory of the accident became just a distant memory, almost like a disturbing dream. Looking back, I realized that the world I knew was disappearing, giving way to a scenario where matter and energy merged harmoniously. I was being led into a new chapter where the logic and physics of our everyday lives did not apply. In the midst of this transition, the feeling of fear gave way to an inexplicable confidence, as if a greater force assured me that all the suffering had been worth it to reach that sublime state of peace and acceptance. As the transition was completed, my perception opened to a new universe of possibilities. In the blink of an eye, I left behind the pain and chaos of the accident and was transported to a scenario that defied all earthly logic. I found myself facing a world that seemed painted with the colors of hope and peace. The horizon was full of warm and soft tones, where the blue of the sky met the gold of the sun's rays, forming a spectacle of light and harmony. I walked, or rather, floated, through a vast flower field. The vibrantly colored flowers danced in a serene breeze, each petal reflecting the light in an almost magical way. The sound was a constant whisper, as if all of nature was telling ancient secrets, secrets from a time when the divine and the human coexisted in perfect communion. It was in this environment that a deep feeling of welcome invaded me, dispelling all my doubts and fears. "It's so beautiful," I murmured, my voice choked with emotion. With each step, or rather, with each slight movement through the air, I noticed more details of this paradise. Small streams of crystal-clear water meandered between the flowers, and the sound of the water running seemed to sing hymns of peace. The tranquility of that place was such that, for a brief moment, I felt as if I could touch infinity with my hands. In the center of this scenery, I saw a golden bridge that stretched majestically over one of these streams. Its steps seemed to be made of pure light, materializing with each step I took towards it. With a mix of curiosity and reverence, I approached the bridge. As I crossed it, I felt an even deeper change in my soul. On the other side, an immense, white stone building rose, whose facade radiated an intense and warm light that seemed to embrace all those who approached. "Welcome," said a voice that, although not visible, was unmistakable in its sweetness. I stopped, surprised, and looked around, trying to identify the source of the greeting. The soft music that filled the room gained more defined contours, as if each note was whispering words of encouragement and love. The building, with its grandeur and serenity, emanated an aura of sacredness that made me feel small compared to the grandeur of that place. As I walked through the hallways that led inside the building, I saw several people. Men and women of all ages were talking and smiling, as if each meeting there was a celebration of life. It seemed that everyone shared a deep understanding of the meaning of their existence. Each face exuded peace, and each gesture was a reflection of the harmony that reigned in that sacred space. Inside, every room and every hallway told a story of redemption and love. I felt that, there, the pains of the terrestrial world did not exist, replaced by a calm that transcended existence itself. It was at that moment that I realized I wasn't just witnessing paradise. I was experiencing the essence of a new reality, where every detail, every sound, and every color came together to form a symphony of hope and renewal. As I crossed the Golden Bridge, I felt as if time slowed down even more, and an inexplicable emotion began to flood my being. There before me, the scene transformed into a welcoming environment where peace reigned supreme, and every detail seemed to have been carefully carved to convey love and comfort. It was at that moment that, among the serene smiles of those around me, I recognized faces that had long since left this world. My heart quickened when I saw my father, John Anderson, approaching with firm steps and a look full of tenderness and understanding. His features, rejuvenated and serene, emanated the same security as before, but now bathed in a soft and comforting light. He extended his arms and, in a calm and deep tone of voice, said, "Michael, my son, you have arrived. Here we are all at peace." That simple welcome caused a wave of emotion to invade my chest, as if all the longing and love repressed for years finally materialized in that moment. Beside her, I could see the graceful figure of my grandmother, Elizabeth Anderson. His presence was enveloping, like the warm embrace of a lost home, and his smile was capable of calming the darkest internal storms. Approaching, she murmured, "My dear, you have always been our pride, and even out of sight, our love for you has never ceased." Her words felt like a balm, healing the invisible wounds left by years of doubt and suffering. It wasn't long before my uncle, Robert Anderson, joined us, bringing with him a jovial energy that contrasted with the nostalgia-filled silence of the place. He laughed, with that contagious laugh that always had the power to brighten the darkest moments, and commented, "Michael, you always had a flame inside you, a light that not even time could put out. We are here to remind you of who you are, even when everything seems lost." His voice, filled with joy and encouragement, resonated as a reminder that family unity was eternal, even beyond the limits of physical existence. I felt embraced by this family who, despite being absent from my daily life, continued to guide me with their wisdom and unconditional love. Every word, every gesture, reinforced the certainty that death was not the end, but a transition to a form of existence where bonds are never broken. Between smiles, tears, and silent looks of complicity, my family explained to me that, although that place resembled a paradise, I was not yet its permanent resident. "You came here for a reason, Michael, but there are missions that await you back on Earth," my father said, his voice firm but full of melancholy. The message, although difficult to accept, carried the understanding that our journey was interconnected by responsibilities that transcend mere physical existence. As I listened to those words, the environment around me seemed to pulse with the wisdom of those who have passed away. Every face, every gesture, reminded me that the bonds of true love never break, and that even in the midst of celestial light, life on earth continued to demand our presence. And so, amid silent tears and smiles that mixed longing and hope, I was convinced that my journey still had much to offer. As I absorbed every detail of that paradise, a restlessness began to emerge within me. With each step he took, the feeling that something great was yet to come intensified. It was then that, as I tried to advance into an area where a blinding light flickered on the horizon, I felt a subtle barrier, as if an invisible force wanted to stop me from crossing. At that exact moment, my grandmother and father stepped forward, their soft gestures demonstrating an urgency that I still didn't fully understand. "Michael, wait," my father said in a calm but firm tone, as he stopped him from moving forward. "There is something important you need to understand before moving forward." I didn't have time to respond, as a radiant presence manifested before me, causing the air around me to fill with an intoxicating, serene energy. Before my eyes, Jesus appeared, dressed in a white robe that seemed to capture and reflect all, the light of that heavenly environment. His eyes, full of compassion, met mine, and in that look, I felt as if all my doubts and fears were dissipated. "Michael, my son," he spoke in a voice that vibrated softly in the silence. "You cannot remain here. Your journey on earth is not yet over." Those words, spoken with such tenderness, resonated in my heart. Despite the beauty and peace that place offered, I realized that there was a greater reason for my return. Jesus then stretched out his hands, inviting me to come closer. With every step I took toward him, I saw flashes of scenes I had never imagined. Images of my mother, Linda Anderson, crying in the hospital, desperate next to my body, and glimpses of my daughter's future, where the absence of a father left a void impossible to fill. "You are essential to them, Michael," Jesus continued, his voice carrying a comforting authority. His departure would cause immeasurable pain, something that would affect not only his family, but also all those who depend on his love and care. As his words unfolded, a feeling of responsibility washed over me. I remembered the simple but precious moments shared with my mother and the silent promise I had made to myself to always take care of the ones I loved. I felt the weight of destiny, but also the lightness of knowing that despite everything, I had the chance to make a difference. Jesus, noticing the anguish mixed with hope in my eyes, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Fear not, Michael. Life is made of choices and paths that intertwine. Although this place is a haven of peace, the world below still needs your touch, your compassion. Every gesture of love you perform echoes in the universe." His eyes shone with an intense light that seemed to penetrate deep into my soul. For a long moment, I was immersed in that gaze, feeling that all my struggles, pains, and achievements fit into a larger mosaic, a divine tapestry of experiences that shaped me for a singular purpose. "I understand," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "But how can I be sure I'm making the right choice?" Jesus smiled, and in that smile, the certainty of an ancestral truth was present. "The truth, Michael, is that love always prevails. Your mission is not just to survive, but to illuminate the lives of others, even if silently and discreetly. Trust the path you follow." As his words echoed, the intensity of the light around me seemed to calm down, leaving me with a feeling of clarity and serenity I had never experienced before. As the presence of Jesus dissipated, I was led into a new dimension of this mystical experience. Without warning, the scene transformed again. In the blink of an eye, I found myself transported to the heart of New Orleans Carnival. But not as I knew it, with its superficial colors and joy, but rather with a revealing look at its deeper, darker meaning. I walked through streets where the crowd mixed in a frenetic dance, the infectious rhythms of drums and saxophones mixed with screams of euphoria, but, in my eyes, the vibrant lights hid unsettling shadows. As I progressed, I began to notice details that went unnoticed by ordinary eyes. On every corner, between laughter and smiles of exuberant costumes, a dense and charged atmosphere hovered, as if invisible forces were observing every movement of the revelers. "Michael, look beyond the surface," whispered a voice that seemed to emerge from the energy-charged air itself. Standing in the middle of the crowd, I watched as revelers indulged in excess. Alcohol, lust, and lack of control turned the party into a portal to something I couldn't explain. The collective energy, seemingly harmless at first glance, seemed to fuel a hidden presence. It's as if every laugh and every scream opens a door to something dark, I commented to myself, trying to understand the message that was hidden behind the glitter and glamour. As the crowd stirred, I saw, in barely perceptible glimpses, shapes skulking in the shadows, entities with vague silhouettes but clear intentions, lurking among the excesses of the festivities. In one of the most intense moments, I came across a group of people in a trance, their eyes glazed over, dancing in an almost hypnotic way. The contrast between the apparent joy and the emptiness of their eyes was disturbing. "These souls are vulnerable," said an inner voice that seemed to echo the wisdom of Jesus. "They give themselves over not only to pleasure, but to an illusion that imprisons them." I walked among the revelers, and with each step, the carnival lights took on different hues, from a vibrant yellow, which symbolized the celebration, to a dark and melancholy tone, full of warning. It was at that moment that I felt a close and serene presence. A figure emerging from the crowd, dressed in a simple tunic, but with a deep and compassionate look. This figure reminded me of Jesus' words and served to reinforce the message. Carnival, in its festive essence, hid a spiritual risk for those who allowed themselves to be carried away by excess. "Michael, not everything is as it seems," said the figure, his voice calm and firm. "This festival, so admired for its beauty and energy, can be a trap, a battlefield between forces that seek to feed on men's vulnerability." His words reverberated with a painful truth, and I felt as if every cell of my being awakened to a new consciousness, where the glow of celebration mixed with the need for soul care. As I watched the frenetic dancing around me, I understood that the party was not just a moment of leisure, but a ritual that could open portals to negative influences. The revelation left me filled with deep concern, but also with a sense of urgency. I needed to look more closely at spirituality, at the balance between fun and the preservation of the inner essence, as tamwar. The vision of Carnival faded before me. A new anguish invaded my heart. The revelation of the shadows behind the party made me reflect deeply on what I was leaving behind. In that whirlwind of sensations, images of my mother, Linda Anderson, emerged with an almost overwhelming force. I saw her, lonely and desperate, next to my inert body in the hospital, her eyes filled with tears and a silence of pain that spoke louder than words. "I can't let her suffer like this," I thought, my chest tight. At that moment, Jesus' voice echoed firmly, "Michael, life on earth still needs your love, your compassion. Your return is essential." His every word hit like a hammer, reaffirming the importance of my mission. At the same time, the feeling of renewal mixed with the regret for what I would leave behind, creating an internal conflict between the yearning for peace and the inescapable duty to reciprocate the love that was so dear to me. As these images alternated, I realized that I was on a threshold. On one side, paradise, where every touch of light and every breath of air promised an eternity of serenity. On the other, life on Earth, full of challenges, but also opportunities to transform pain into hope. I felt an irresistible tug on my soul, which led me back to the place where it all began, to the hospital. Upon returning, the scene was almost surreal. In a dimly lit room, doctors moved with haste and concern, their whispered voices trying to calm the atmosphere. In the midst of this scenario, I found my mother. Linda was there, at the bedside, her eyes red from crying and her hands shaking, holding an old photograph. When she saw me, she let out a muffled scream that mixed with the buzzing of the devices. "Mommy?" I murmured as I ran to hug her. Her tears turned into suppressed sobs, but in that moment, all the words of Jesus, my family, and my own experience reminded me that my life was a precious gift. "You're back, Michael." "I've always been waiting for this moment," she said, her voice choked and full of love. The doctors, surprised by the speed of my recovery, exchanged looks of admiration and astonishment. I felt every cell in my body vibrating with new energy, as if a new beginning had been sealed in every beat of my heart. In short, brief conversations, the doctors commented that the predictions were disastrous, but that my strength seemed to defy the laws of medicine. As I rested, recovering from the physical and emotional trauma, I spent hours in silence reflecting on what the experience had meant. Every moment was filled with a mixture of gratitude and responsibility. I understood now that my mission was not just to survive, but to illuminate the lives of those who suffered, in a discreet yet powerful way. "My journey doesn't end here," I whispered to myself amid the stillness of the hospital. The determination in my eyes already reflected acceptance of the burden I would carry. Coming back to life was more than a physical rebirth. It was a call to transform pain into love and anguish into compassion, to show that even in the darkest moments, light can be found. After the intense moments of my return, the calm of the hospital gave way to intense self-reflection. I spent hours sitting on the edge of the bed, reliving every detail of the experience and questioning the paths that life had in store for me. The physical scars were still visible, but it was the indelible mark on my soul that reminded me the transformation was underway. During this period of recovery, my mind was buzzing with thoughts, and conversations with doctors, family, and friends became moments of profound revelation. "Michael, what you went through is beyond what science can explain," commented one of the doctors, with a mix of perplexity and admiration in his eyes, as he checked my vital signs. "I feel like every second of this new beginning is a second chance," I replied, my voice choked with emotion. "An opportunity to correct mistakes and value each moment." My mother, Linda, visited me daily. She brought little souvenirs, a hot cup of tea, an old family photograph, simple gestures that carried immeasurable meaning. During one of these visits, while holding my hand tenderly, she said, "You always had a unique shine, Michael. I know this experience changed everything, but I believe it only intensified the light you have inside." These words, spoken with the purity of someone who only knows unconditional love, echoed in my mind and served as a reminder for each new decision I made. I realized that the almost mystical experience was not just a call to return to life, but an invitation to transform the way I lived. I needed to reconnect with what really mattered: family, friends, and, above all, love for others. I then decided to embrace a radical life change. I started going to community groups and support centers, where people faced difficult times and sought redemption. In one meeting, as I shared my testimony simply and honestly, I heard a young man murmur, "Your story makes me believe that even in the worst moments, there is a light that can guide us." These words were like a balm for me. Each story, each look of gratitude, reinforced the certainty that I had a role, even if silent, in the lives of those who needed hope. I decided to dedicate my time to helping the elderly and people in vulnerable situations. At a local shelter, I started to hear stories of struggles and overcoming, and to share, with humility, a little of my own journey. Over time, the habit of reflecting led me to rediscover old passions. I resumed reading the Bible, which before had been just an object of curiosity, but which had now become a spiritual guide. Each verse took on new meaning, resonating with the teachings that Jesus had conveyed to me during my experience. I understood that life, with all its imperfections, was a gift that needed to be lived with purpose. Thus, my routine transformed. The days were filled with small gestures of love, a shared smile, a word of comfort, an attentive look at the needs of others. The pain of the past mixed with gratitude for the present, and the responsibility to live a full life became increasingly clear. That man who had once faced death now found himself guided by a renewed purpose, to be the light in the darkness for those who, like me, sought to find meaning in the midst of adversity. When I think about my youth, at 17 years old, I remember a day that, in itself, already brought dark omens. During that turbulent period, I was surprised by a storm of unimaginable proportions. The sky turned into a sea of heavy clouds, and lightning cut the air furiously, as if nature itself wanted to strike me. I was alone, trying to find shelter, under the awning of an old building, when, suddenly, an intense and deafening flash ripped through the sky. Before I could even react, I was struck by a bolt of lightning that seemed to carry within it all the strength of the universe. The feeling was indescribable, as if an explosion of energy had taken over every fiber of my being, launching me out of my own existence. My soul seemed to detach from my body in an instant, and the world around me became a blur of lights and shadows. I floated, helpless and aimless, as if trapped between two worlds. In the midst of this feeling of detachment, something singular happened. I felt the presence of an angel. "Michael, don't be afraid," whispered a soft, welcoming voice, which seemed to emerge from a place where time didn't pass. I couldn't see the angel clearly, but I could tell he was there to guide me. As he floated, he led me along a path of pure light, opening before my eyes a panorama that defied earthly description. Each step, or rather, each slight impulse, was like crossing a door into a world full of colors and intense emotions, where the limits of time and space dissolved. As I walked alongside the angel, I could see scenes from my own life unfolding in a kind of spiritual mosaic. Remarkable moments, both of glory and regret, appeared like projections on an invisible screen. I remembered the times I was selfish, the missed opportunities, and the moments when love and kindness played a fundamental role. Each memory was accompanied by raw emotion and at the same time a deep feeling of responsibility. I saw clearly how my choices affected not only me, but also those around me. "Look carefully, Michael," said the angel, with a voice that seemed to echo from an abyss of wisdom. "Your every action resounds throughout the universe. There is beauty in moments of love, but there are also painful lessons in mistakes made." I, immersed in this whirlwind of feelings, felt a weight in my heart that I had never experienced. It was as if, in that moment, my entire existence was being evaluated and understood in its entirety. The images of my life danced before me, and at the same time transformed into a message of redemption. That encounter with the lightning and subsequent journey between planes showed me that life is a fragile gift full of opportunities for transformation. The angel remained by my side as I absorbed the full intensity of that experience. "You have the chance to rewrite your story, to make amends, and to follow a brighter path," he advised. His voice, filled with love and compassion, left an indelible mark on my soul, planting a seed of change that would blossom over time. I felt, at that moment, that each step taken in that limbo between life and death was a lesson, an invitation to value each moment and always seek forgiveness and love. Just when I thought my spiritual journey had reached its peak, a new light shone, revealing that the path to self-knowledge and love still had chapters to write. I was in a serene state of mind, but the whirlwind of emotions I had gone through asked me for one last bit of clarity. Amid silent reflection and the echo of the teachings that had already transformed me, I felt the unmistakable presence of Jesus again, this time closer and more palpable than I had ever imagined. I was sitting in a small hospital garden, where the soft evening light played with the shadows, when the breeze began to carry a subtle and comforting melody. Slowly, the sounds intensified, and the environment transformed into an intimate sanctuary. It was then that my eyes filled with tears as I saw the figure of Jesus approaching, this time without the veil of distance. His features were marked by a divine serenity, and the sparkle in his eyes seemed to contain all the love and compassion in the universe. "Michael, my son." He spoke with a voice that, although calm, reverberated with the authority of someone who knows the secrets of time. "Your heart has already accepted many of my words, and today it is time to reaffirm the path you choose." Your words were like a balm for my soul, bringing with them the certainty that despite everything I experienced, my mission was to continue to spread love, kindness, and hope among those who still wandered in darkness. As we sat together, amid the soft scent of flowers and the rustling of leaves, Jesus revisited the most memorable moments of my experiences. He reminded me of the accident, the transition to another plane, the vision of the sky, and the reunion with my loved ones. Every memory, even the most painful ones, now took on a new meaning. They were bricks in the construction of the man I would become. Every mistake, every tear, and every smile, it has all shaped your character. You have been called to be a light to others, a silent but immensely important guide, he stated with conviction, as a cool breeze seemed to nod in approval. I, with my voice choked with emotion, asked, "But Jesus, how can I be sure that I am truly helping? What if my words are insufficient to comfort those who are suffering?" He looked at me with a deep look, which seemed to see beyond appearances and unspoken words. "Michael, the truth is that every gesture, no matter how small, creates waves of change. The love you spread, even in silence, resonates for eternity. It's not about being a great speaker, but about living in such a way that your example inspires others to seek the light." In the midst of this silent dialogue, a sense of peace came over me, and the certainty that my experiences were, in fact, a divine gift that compelled me to act with compassion and humility. Jesus continued, "Remember, my son, that life is made of cycles. Your reunion with me today is a reaffirmation that you have the strength to transform every pain into learning and every loss into a new beginning." Hearing these words, I felt a wave of deep gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. I knew my journey wouldn't end there. It just gained new nuances and directions. Jesus' presence at that moment was a perennial reminder that, even in the midst of adversity, love is the bond that unites all souls, and that my mission was to continue to sow this seed of hope. With this last revelation, I ended the narrative of my experience, not as a goodbye, but as a new beginning. I returned to my life with the certainty that each day is a new opportunity to love, forgive, and illuminate the path of those who cross my path.